You've probably heard the phrase, sold down the river, or sold me up the river. This idiom came from the domestic slave trade, and now it's an expression for betrayal or being sacrificed for another's own benefit. The story of Charles Hope is a prime example of how this phrase came to be. Charles was enslaved under a man named James Hartwell, who lived in North Carolina. Around 1809, Hartwell moved to the Indiana Territory, bringing Charles with him. Slavery was outlawed in all the old Northwest territories, including Indiana, since the Ordinance of 1787. But that did not stop the slave owners who were moving into the region. What they did was use the old indentured servitude loophole. This essentially was making the slaves into indentured servants on paper, but for all intents and purposes, they were slaves. Almost nothing changed. An emancipation letter signed and sealed by James Hartwell, dated 18th of October, 1809, declared Charles Hope a free man. The letter goes on to describe Charles as a quiet and obedient servant, with qualities that earned him his freedom. But as the letter continues, there were some terms and conditions. Due to some necessary expenses, Charles had to agree to 29 years of indentured servitude. Without knowing how to read or write, Charles Hope signed his mark and away nearly 30 years of his life. Many newly freed men like Charles were fooled into indentured servitude in this manner. A month later, Hartwell sold Charles off to a neighbor for 4 head of horses, 10 head of cattle, and 100 acres of military donation land, and a promissory note for $300. But it gets worse. Charles was traveling down the Wabash River with his new master about a year after his quote-unquote emancipation, assuming that they were on a trip to Illinois, which was another free territory. Then he noticed they reached the Ohio River, and were still going further south. Charles Hope found himself back in chains, and was sold back into slavery, and that's the last we ever hear from him.